I want to thank everyone who joined us today. The situation in Ukraine is rather grim, and it's very important, we feel, that we hear from people who are the heroes on the ground, people dealing with the situation, Basher Husham. We all are aware in a global sense of what's transpiring, but to understand from the leaders and heroes, both in Ukraine and in Poland. We have a panel. We'll see if all the panels are able to come. Many of them are so engaged in their activities, they may not be able to make it. But we felt it was critical as part of the Rabbinical Council of America, in conjunction with Tradition, our partner, to make you aware and let you hear from the people who are actually directly involved in the situation, both so that we have that level of awareness, and then, of course, equally important to see what we can do to assist our brothers and sisters who are going through such difficult times. With that, I turn the floor over to Rabbi Sachs.
Thank you, Rabbi Binyamin Blau, President of the RCA, and thank you to Rabbi Mark Dratch, Executive Director, our publisher at the RCA, publishers of the Tradition Journal. We have very many important things on our mind, but we would ask our listeners to please visit us at traditiononline.org to see what we're doing in the journal and to subscribe. If you're watching us on Facebook Live and you're right there, you might as well just give us a like to keep updated with everything that's going on in our journal. But much more important, if you take a look at the links on Facebook, or if you're watching this later on YouTube, down below in the comments, we have links to a variety of different organizations that are doing good work on behalf of our Jewish brothers and sisters in Ukraine, in Poland, to help support the refugee crisis of Ukrainian Jewry and the Ukrainian nation there in Poland. And we encourage you, most important, to generously support these organizations, each one of which is connected to one of our guests and panelists tonight. We have with us at the moment Rabbi Mordechai Bald, who is the Rabbi of Lviv and the surrounding region. We are also anticipating the arrival of Rabbi Michael Shudrick, Chief Rabbi of Poland, who texted me moments ago to say he was called away to something rather pressing, and Dr. Karina Sokolowski, who is the Director of the Joint Distribution Committee in Poland, who quite literally may be involved in life-saving work, which is certainly much more important than what we're doing here. But in order to start on time, we're going to start with Rabbi Bald, with whom I've had a long and very pleasurable friendship, although we've never met in person, and we have to correct that, Rabbi Bald. But I was thinking the other day that if I wanted to write a political potboiler, a kind of Tom Clancy type novel, and we're going to set as the villain a megalomaniacal kind of James Bond-like villain, someone who, let's say, poisons his opposition with radioactivity. And that figure is going to invade some neighboring country, and he's going to do it in the name of ridding it of Nazism. In the process of doing so, he's going to topple an important memorial to the actual victims of Nazism. In the process, he'll kill a few innocent bystanders in the process. For good measure, in order to kind of thicken my plot, I'm going to make the president of the invaded nation, the nation which needs to be denazified, I'm going to make him a proudly self-identifying Jew, the only other such Jewish world leader outside the state of Israel. And well, let's make it better. Let's say that Jewish president of this invaded nation got his job by playing a president on television. To top it all off, let's set this whole drama in the middle of a worldwide global pandemic, the worst in the century. If I were to submit this book proposal, there is not a publisher in the world 5 years ago who would have accepted it. The editor immediately would have run his red pen through it, telling me that my imagination is too wild, that it's too implausible. No reader will believe it. I don't go on this whole spiel a week before Purim in order to make light of the situation. God forbid, quite the contrary. It's a demonstration that reality is sometimes more unbelievable than what the mind of fiction can conjure. It is, reality always is, if not just more unbelievable, certainly much more tragic. Rabbi Bald, you have for many years, for many decades, and now during these past 2 weeks, been on the front lines of a very unusual Jewish community. And when I say front lines, until 2 weeks ago, I was speaking metaphorically, but now we're speaking quite literally. You have been involved from your side of the border in a horrible refugee crisis. I mean, it's hard to even keep track of the numbers, but we're talking of above 2 million displaced refugees, a death toll, which of course involves both military and civilian, including civilian children victims, destruction of Ukrainian society and Ukrainian Jewish society within that, destruction economically, physically, socially, culturally, and of course, in our concern, spiritually as well. So help us understand, before we even get to talking about who you are and how you got to where you are, share with us an insight, a vignette, something that you've experienced in the last 2 weeks that will help us understand how much we don't understand, what we can't possibly fathom just by watching the news very carefully. Rabbi Bold.
Okay, thank you very much, Rabbi Blau for the RCA, and Rabbi Jeffrey Sachs from the Traditional and the JDC, Irina Sokolovsky, and everybody watching. Thank you all, the board members and everybody involved. First thing that our mothers taught us, don't stuff your favorite down anybody's throat. We have a concept of Ritzoine Zekavoide. The guy doesn't want it, don't force him. Don't tell us what we like, don't tell us don't save us from ourselves. So if anybody wants to save the Jewish president from Nazism, I mean, Rabbi Jacks, you said it all. You said it all. So I just want to get back to one concept, that the word truth played in this war a role just as much as any other crisis, the crisis on truth. When numerous, I mean, on their selfies, on their own selfies, their own phones, when they caught them, the Russian soldiers, many of them said, we came here for exercise, so some exercises. And then many others said, fellows, don't come here, they don't want us. They thought they're getting a hero's welcome. They're saving us, they're saving the Ukrainians. That was total lie, that was total lie. So first thing is, don't stuff any favors down our throats. We know what we want. And the second thing is, if in the crisis is a matter of lying, the soldiers didn't even know. So let me say this very simple. Everybody's wondering how the Ukrainians withstood and how they're fighting and how they're having a fighting chance. And here's very push-it. If an 18 to 30-year-old comes and he doesn't know why he came and he's not passionate about it, so of course, when they catch him, they're totally disillusioned. They have no idea what they're doing there. There's no ideal, there's no idea behind that. So of course, while the Ukrainians are fighting for their lives with the greatest passion, just for survival, they just want to live, they just want to protect the women and children. So of course they have a fighting chance. Without any miracles, if somebody's passionate about saving his life, boy, he's going to give it to the last drop. So let's get back to the Ukrainians right now. Yeah, there's some people say, let them both win. I'm not going to say if they're horrible, if they're awful people with a terrible character. I'm not going to judge them. Let them judge themselves. But I will say, anybody that says, well, it's payback day, it's the times of Mashiach, that's a cheap shot. First of all, you have Jews on both sides. But what about the Jewish message to the world? What about our mission? We forgot our mission statement. Humanitarian aid. What about that aspect? So I just want to get it all away. Anybody sitting behind the screen and hears any videos, and I heard a few of them saying it's time of payback, Mashiach's times. That guy is sitting al Sira Basa, sitting protected by his government, whichever nation he lives in. And he's sitting with the comfort of his throne behind some computer or some recorder and saying it's time for payback and so on. How foolish I'm not going to say worse words. I'm going to say how foolish can a person be that Hashem gave it to us to show the exemplary case of being universal, being altruistic, human aid, just human aid, saving lives. It pains us, all of us rabbis that in Kirov, any rabbi that's worldly, any rabbi that has an open mind could understand. Let me see him live without the protection of any government, and let me see him run his mouth then. This great rabbi, let him run his mouth in front of the big shots. Let him run his mouth in front of Ishes. Let me see how great, how courageous they are. So let's get this out of the way. So we have to save every life, every human being, number one, Jews, non-Jews, and we have to fight evil when we see it and not give in. So with that, I want to say the matzav in Ukraine, if you allow me.
Yes, please.
Just like you mentioned, Rabbi, nobody believed. I mean, they send out this cartoon, this on WhatsApp, and I got it also, of 4 pictures in one frame. When is the Russian coming? When is war coming? Everybody threatens us, but nobody believed it. It's like people are waiting and waiting. And from Wednesday to Thursday, the Americans said, the other nations said, nobody believed one word. We thought politics as usual, we have to frighten us, we have to distract it. Nobody believed it. And all of a sudden in the morning, when the sirens went on and bombing all over, as you mentioned before, this was a wake up to reality that nobody ever dreamed of since the Second World War. And I have to say the following. People think that the main thing, will you bomb, will you not bomb? What about the word Baha'u'llah? What about when people they can't think? And that's what I experienced. What about millions of people? Do you know what it means that I try to get out a car to Mezhbish just the last few days, this week as we're talking? No driver dared to go. Nobody wants to go. Even those that want to go that way, they're not going to come to our direction. Why? They tell me, just imagine from Cleveland, from Detroit, it's backed up bumper to bumper all the way to New York City. Just imagine 1,000 kilometers backed up bumper to bumper. People are trying to save. Just imagine the quick trains that usually can go 80 to 100 kilometers per hour. The express trains, it takes a day or two to get what it usually takes 5, 6, 7 hours. Just imagine that, because the trains are bumper to bumper. Just imagine, Chas v'sholom Iran, Chas v'sholom, I don't want to equivalent, but times 1,000 of people killing themselves to get onto a train that sardines is a luxury, smashed in, trampled on. A lady came 2 days ago in the morning, and a lady comes with a daughter to our synagogue as a refugee, to just a roof over the heads, warmth, and the freezing cold outside, and get a warm meal and a mattress to sleep on. And she cried, and my daughter, it's very extremely involved, and the colleagues from all over Ukraine, I don't know who gave out our numbers, as if with the Red Cross or something, literally hundreds of phone calls a day, 20 hours out of the 24. And this is 5 in the morning, mind you, 5 in the morning. And she ran because Komendansky hour, that you're not allowed to be on the streets in curfew, it's very dangerous. And people don't even wait till 10 o'clock curfew, 11 o'clock in some places. As soon as it's dark, I can't leave, I'm afraid. What do you mean? We're sending a car to give you a package for your family of food. I'm not going out to the car. Many women are afraid. The hooligans with the guns on the street, the pachad that's going on is unbearable. So this lady comes from Kiev, and she traveled more than 30 hours bulging these 2 bags because they robbed the bags. No car wants to come from that area to here. Why? They're going to throw me out of my car while I'm in traffic and loot and kill and rob everything. People are afraid. It's lawlessness. It's horrific what's going on. You don't need bombs without the bomb. buildings. If somebody's terrified, every second running to the bunker 3 floors down, I mean, you can't think straight. And I have to tell you, I'll tell you, Zocher Shmoy, Rabbi Michael, the chief rabbi, Rabbi Michael Shudrick told me, as a good friend, he said, maybe your mission, I complained that I have to run away, I really feel bad, I'm betraying them, I'm losing. He said, no, you can't think straight. You have to take your kids out to know that, Baruch Hashem, out of harm's way. And because you don't know when they'll close the border, you don't know when they'll come crashing bullets and bombs. Who knows, Chas v'shalom? So get out of the way. He said, you can come to my office, come to Warsaw. And if you're in Warsaw already, why don't you go to Israel? You can function a lot better. And I have to say, my job got even more difficult in terms of volume and depth. There's so much going on, so many phone calls, so much organization. I have to say the following. You know what it means that we never believed? I have to say something that nobody ever believed. This is something that caught me more than any other thing, even after I heard that. People came to us for Shabbos, and the whole Shabbos, all the time, more people. And I saw people without anything. They ran for their lives. The bombs came, they ran for their lives. But I hear them saying to each other, the husband to the wife, did you take those documents? What about that apartment? And I had one family of 4 generations and with apartments, and they're all checking each other. Do you have the documents? What about the business? What about your business? Do you have it? And they checked it. All they had is clutched in this little papka, this little folder of documents. And I said, what do you mean? You're not going back? He said, no, we're not tired of living. Never again. No, we're not going back. So I was wondering, what's this with the documents? We all read about it in the Holocaust, and sheepishly, they look at me bashfully and they say, hopefully one day our grandchildren will go back and they'll have proof of property. So they will reclaim their properties. I never imagined to see that.
Sounds familiar, history repeating itself. Before we come back to the current situation, let's help the many people online understand a little bit about you. We're all very accustomed to our beloved brethren from Chabad who go off from New York to far-flung places. I should mention you are not a Chabad Chassid, but you are a Karliner Chassid who has been in Lvov for near on 30 years.
Since 93, we're pushing up
almost 30.
And many more.
You've spent your whole adult life and your whole professional life serving the community in Lviv. You got there shortly after the fall of the Soviet Union, and you've been there now for 30 years. So first of all, just tell us, who are you? Where did you come from? How, as a young man, did you end up in Lviv? And then we can talk about what's happened there over these 3 decades.
I'm a simple guy from New York. There's a continent in of itself called Borough Park. That we thought the world ends at the 60th Street on one side and 40 or 39th on the other side. And I was living in my cocoon, in my little bubble. And my Rebbe, who was very involved in it, even we're talking about in the 70s and the 80s when very few people traveled. He traveled a lot. And even we're talking about, he was a young man, really young. He's still young today. He's close to 70. And
70 seems a lot younger to you now than it did 30 years ago.
Yeah. And something that he kept on repeating, that when our brethren after the Second World War, they ran for their lives, all the refugees, and they came and nobody looked at them, nobody wanted them. Let's not repeat it. Let's learn from history and don't repeat history. Let's be there for our brethren. When the Chernobyl, the nuclear power was exploded, that's when he became. I remember in the Stolen Shul in Borough Park, there was the left wing section for dozens of people that immigrated to America. He had a minyan for them, and they treated them like with gold. I mean, they treated them with silk gloves, because he said this is, I mean, they weren't there. These are the people that had, I'll say it in this way. Rabbi Chana Wasserman said he could understand the Holocaust. He doesn't understand it in a practical way, but he can understand Nistorim Dark Hashem, it's hidden Hashem's ways, but he can never believe. I heard this from Rabbi Dishon, the Shlita, And he said, I heard in Lvov when he came, he used to come a lot to Lvov. He was one of the pioneers of Kiev for the Russians. And he told us, this is probably 394, and he told Vassal and said, Zatzal, he's Hashem Yinkadomai. He said, Rabbi Cholan said, I cannot understand the communism. Hashem, what do you want from them? If you take away their physical lives, I get it. But what do you gain from taking away their spiritual lives, the eternal life, their eternity? What would you do that for? So these are the people that came in 86 and 87 until the 90s. And that's the Karliner Rebbe got heavily involved. And he sent out many shluchim. I don't know if everybody lasted. It's difficult with the family. We're one of those that stayed. But unfortunately, there are many courageous people. I wish I was one of the courageous people.
The Rebbe asked you to go to Lviv, and you said Hineni. You were then a relatively young man. You were in your early 20s.
Yeah, so I would say the following. Moshe Rabbeinu argued for 7 days. I argued for 7 weeks. But then I understood that there's something higher, a stronger power than my will or the collective picture, the personal mission. I understood that there's something pushing him that I so didn't want. I'm a private person. I'm a bashful person. When I leave Lvov, I come to event and they ask me, why weren't you there? I say, check your videos. You'll see me there. I'm that quiet, not to mix in, not to steal anybody's show. So I had no idea. Would you send me? I have no idea. But one thing I did find out was that I went there once for 3 months. I promised him and I gave it to him. And then he tells me, I said, I'm done at 3 months. I kept my promise. He tells me, oh, so come to Israel. And I said, but I'm going back home. He said, yeah, but just come through Israel. I said, Israel is east from where I am, and United States is west. He says, but I want to talk to you. I thought he can talk by phone. No, he says, come here, please come. So I came to Israel, and I remember I landed in the airport, and I came to, it was between Mincha and Maimer, like a 15, 20-minute interval, and I walk into the shul in Yerushalayim, and he says, oh, Shalom Aleichem. I said, so what do you ever want to speak to me about? Because I'm just heading up. So he says, what? Come to Israel and you leave and go ready? I said, no, I'm going to take a break after 3 months. I don't want to call it what it was. So he said, so come back in a few days. So I come back in a few days. And he says, when are you leaving? I said, tomorrow. So come back tomorrow. When are you leaving? Tonight. So come back tonight. When are you leaving? My taxi's waiting. He says, where to? To the airport. Where are you heading? I said, home. He says, where's that? I say, good old New York. And he tells me, that was the worst. He said, your home is in Lvov. And then I argued with him for another few minutes. And I asked him, is it like Shlomo Melech? He wanted to save his friend. He didn't answer. Usually he does. And I just was frightened back into Lvov. And I agreed for another 3 months. And since then, I lost my yearly calendar.
So you've been there already many years. You raised your family there, your children, your wife certainly is there with you. You arrive in Lvov in 1992. It's shortly after the fall of the Soviet Union. 93. It's shortly after the fall of the Soviet Union. Ukraine has finally been constituted as an independent nation, a right for which it is, of course, struggling in these very days. You didn't speak Ukrainian. You didn't speak Russian.
No.
What was the community like? What was happening on the ground when you first arrived?
Let's put it this way. It reminds me a little incident. They have to have Yiddish for that. In Yiddish, there's a word zu brechen, to break, and then there's a word brechen, to throw up. And I remember the first Seder that was after being there for months. And the first Seder that I had, we did many Zdorim with 1,500 portions. So I did the traditional part, and then the eating after Shulchan Aruch and the singing I let for the volunteers come. And I knew one thing, but these old people, you can't, the attention span is that short. So I decided we're going to do, we had this halachic issue that, we have to start like 2 hours before it gets night because they have to go to sleep early. They can't be in the dark. So we're going to do the whole Seder, and then this first Seder, we're just going to keep the Kiddush and the matzah and the traditional plate for the minute after we can make Kiddush and start the Seder, practically speaking. And guess what? I remember this is within 3 to 5 minutes after we started the whole event. The matzahs, my whole American, my Western background, which is not one guy, drives, but as everybody should be the driver. Everybody gets that 9-inch plate there were no plasticware there. I had to import from America plastic 9-inch plates, give everybody the traditional plate with everybody their own 3 matzahs, manischewitz at the time. And everybody with a bottle of grape juice, a kedem grape juice, and a cup and a plate, the whole works with the salt water. We worked on it for weeks and we finally got it right. And I start the Kiddush and I'm just doing the yachatz. And I never got to yachatz. I was going to tell him in Yiddish, would have translated Sibrech, the middle matzah, to break the middle matzah. There wasn't one middle matzah and there wasn't the top and the bottom matzah either on the table. The whole table with all traditional plates, with everything was gone in the bags. Everybody had a big material bag. And the only thing I saw left was some vodka under the table, if you know what I mean. That, some people had it, they couldn't Pesach without l'chaim. In any case, my point is, I was young and I was frustrated. My whole plan went down the drain. And I said, Yachatz, guess what? It's not Subrech, but Brech the middle matzah. Please vomit the middle matzah so you can break it and then do Yachatz. I had nothing to do Yachatz with. That was at the beginning. And I'm gonna give it to you an analogy, something I heard right when I came. There was a Jew in our kil in the shul that davened there every day. His name is Yankel. And he told me the following: Potigaila, family Potigaila. And his son davens by us today is actually a gab in our shul today. And this fellow tells me the following. He tells me a guy got a job as in charge of the stock room, in charge of the storage house, where they had all goodies. And after a month, he stole everything that wasn't screwed to the ground. And he has it all in his basement, in his apartments and everything else. And then they call him, and after a month, he says, Oy vey is mir, now they're going to put me in jail and one-way ticket to Sibir for stealing so much. And guess what? The guy offers him a paper that this paper goes to the bookkeeper and he gets a salary. And he walks out and he's all in shtoim and he's total shock. And the guy says, what happened? Are you okay? He says, yeah, I just overwhelmed just a little bit. He says, why? He says, I have the keys to the stock room and I get salary too. That was at those times. You know what? That's not today. Today, the Ukrainians have this passion for life, to be altruistic, to be for others. And I have to tell you, that's pleasantly shocking. And people have ideals today. There's no, disenfranchised.
Tell me a little bit right now. If I were to have come a month ago, 3 months ago, 6 months ago, before the tragedy that we're experiencing now, what does one see in Jewish Lvov today? What's Shabbat like? How many people am I going to meet?
Okay, that's a very good question, because the Shita is different today. We have a different outlook today, which was some communities never sent anybody out because they wanted to build communities locally. My mission was, when I came, was to get everybody out to Israel. In other words, or other communities worldwide, wherever everybody wants. If you wanted to go, we have students that went through YU. We had the Lamb family, Dr. Norma Lamb and his son, Shalom Lamb. They helped us out immensely. We had people going through the Or Sameach. In other words, I don't care if you have a pony in back or a pony right over here. Clothing means absolutely nothing. If it means something, just pick and choose your community and we'll try to get you there. And we're talking about way, way above. By 500, we stopped counting. And many of them, we did the weddings in our shul in Lvov, and today they're marrying off their children. And many of them, they got married abroad. We know Israel alone, about 500 people that left. I'm talking about without the parents. Their parents might have gone to other countries, and many of them to Germany. And we tried to persuade the kids they should go to Israel. And most of them served in the army, achrayus to the Jewish nation. I'm not for the army. I'm not against the army. I am for, if you can't serve the army, just serve in a different capacity, but serve your nation and serve the humanity as a whole. So in that sense, we never kept anybody till today. Every year we send out, the more the better. If anybody chooses to come back, it happens to be, nobody chooses to come back to Lvov, but those that do, we would be delighted to take part. So we don't have this up and rising community. We don't have this flourishing. We have a small community, but we do have a community that needs chesed. We have, in general, a month ago, we gave out 600 parcels all the time, 600 parcels.
Food parcels.
Especially during COVID. Food portions, right? It's big bags that many times one person cannot carry. That's how big these heavy bags are. Today, it multiplied the need because of the many refugees that came in. I have to say the following. If you come a month ago, Lvov is one of the most beautiful cities in the former Soviet Union. And not only in beauty, it's a mini Vienna, mini Paris, as many people call it, with all the architecture. But the mini part of it, that you don't have to walk 2 hours to get through it. A 15-minute walk gets you through the main center of the city with all the beauty compact, all in one area.
I've been to Lvov. Unfortunately, you were out of town when I was with a group visiting Lvov and all of Western Ukraine, and it really is quite a charming city. Both the city itself and the Jewish life is always, of course, fascinating to see. I see that Rabbi Shudrick momentarily logged in and seems to have disappeared on us. Again, I know that he's involved in very many important things, but hopefully he will be able to log back in. But I want to move on to a different question.
Can I just say something very important about your question? More importantly, we hear this from all the guests that come. Lvov is a very Western city. They consider themselves higher class, more intelligent, more learned, but more important than anything else, it's a city of extreme politeness. When you walk into the city, in other cities, we find that many people can say, there's two ways of saying you. In Hebrew, you have it, in English, it's both the same, plural as well. But in Hebrew, we have ata and atem. Sometimes somebody above us will tell them atem, right? And in Lvov, you'll never find somebody talking to you down or level to level you. They'll always say atem to you. Very, very, not only intelligent, but very polite and very cultured. So it's very different than the cities that are influenced by the Russians.
Right. Over on Facebook, there's a whole variety of comments which we can't follow in real time as we're having our conversation. But I did receive a few questions from people in advance, and I see it's being discussed over there. It's a rather sensitive question, but it really is the elephant in the room. We've seen very, very, very many admirable acts of heroism, of charity, of kindness, of good feeling amongst men of all backgrounds under very trying circumstances. And the Jewish community has been taking in and taking care without discrimination of anybody else's faith. We're trying to be supportive of the entire Ukrainian nation. And I know that the work of the Jewish communities on the Polish border that are taking in refugees as well. And hopefully Rabbi Shudrick will be here to tell us a little more from that side of things. But yet people are mindful of the history of that place, the history of that people. And I imagine that it must be something of a challenge. Maybe I'm wrong, and I'd like to hear from you what it means to kind of live and work amongst that, to be mindful of the past. And, you know, let's be honest, we're talking about the most horrible episodes in Jewish and in human civilization, but also to be there now under very different circumstances in a very different time and reality. The lighthearted comment I made about the fact that the only other world leader who is a Jew, but ironically being accused of standing on top of a Nazi regime, if it wasn't horrific, it would be a parody. But it calls together a lot of these different issues of the intersection of the past and the present and old realities and perhaps new realities. And how do you navigate that?
Okay, so Rabbi Shudrick called me a few times for his backup, for his support during the crisis this past few weeks. And I have to tell you something that I told him a few times. You can never know, you might be my chief rabbi very soon. And he said, I'm more than happy to welcome you in. Now, I want to say the following. That's very important. This is extremely important. If you ask me, would I rather be on the Russian or Ukrainian? Now, I'm not saying, I'm just speaking just as a Jew, I don't believe in the Russian, they're anti-Semites, and I don't believe the Ukrainian anti-Semites. Maybe in their blood, everybody has some anti-Semitism. Yeah, there's nothing you can do about it. The question is how to react upon it. And I have to say, I'm talking about in terms officially, governments and so on, and the commanders. I wish that the Western countries, I'm talking about even France, I'm talking about Germany, I'm talking about all the civilized countries of today, and England as well. I wish there would be such freedom to practice Judaism like there is in Ukraine. There isn't such freedom of press in Russia, forget it. I mean, again, I'm not accusing anybody of anti-Semitism, but the level of freedom of expressing your ideas, living up to your Jewish values, there's nothing like it that I experienced anywhere in Eastern or Western Europe. And that's why, for me, it would be very important that the Ukrainians win just as a Jew. I'm not even talking about who's right, who's wrong, which, of course, I believe that don't stuff your favors down anybody's throats. Of course, they're dead wrong.
Well, I just want to jump in for a moment and say that's so important for us. Beside the fact that listening to your story is inspiring of Hasidic Yid from Borough Park spending his lifetime in Lvov is an image that it's hard to wrap one's head around it, and really giving us a perspective. I thank Rabbi Sachs for really giving us that perspective of what Lvov has been like. But this last point is very, very important and very intriguing, because as you mentioned at the outset, we can't lose sight. People try to say, who's the bigger anti-Semite? It's not the issue at all here. We have evil. We have evil being perpetrated against Ukrainians who are innocent, against Jews, and that has to be our focus. We sometimes remember that Koheles wasn't wrong. We've been lulled into a false sense of security that civilized man doesn't do this, and we know that's no longer true. But your last point has been very, very interesting. I spoke about this in my own shul in Cleveland, and one of my balabatim said, I spoke to my mother, and she went through the horrors of the Holocaust under the Ukrainians. She said, it's good, they're getting what they deserve. And we politely discussed why I didn't think that was appropriate in this circumstance. But your observation that the Ukrainians of today are not that way is fascinating. And if you can elaborate more upon that, I'd really love to hear a little more. So you're saying that shul, schools, everything, you have no issues. You're able to do whatever you'd like. I mean, again, obviously not now under the circumstances, but beforehand and hopefully afterwards. That's the situation in Ukraine?
Yes, and more so even now because the governments are reaching out to us. I was supposed to get before a call from my mayor. He asked when is a good time to speak to me. They're reaching out. You need any help? They're all there. They're all there. And I have to say that I wish in New York, where I grew up, my lovely city of New York, I wish we would have the same just distinguishedness, the same respect as a human being like I get over here. That's shocking. That might be, but it's pleasantly shocking. It is something that when war comes around, you see who's who. And I have to tell you, while the hooligans are running the streets and while all the madmen, and it's terrifying, but to know that you have a government today. Now, I don't know what happened yesterday. I wasn't here yesterday, and my family was also murdered. My grandfather, my great-grandfather, if anybody knows Rabbi Shudrick, Zatzal,
Sure,
he
sure.
became an Adam. He became a son-in-law to our family, to Yitzchak Isaac Bald, and they say in Yiddish Bald soon. And that Yitzchak Isaac Bald left about a little over 100 years ago. He left America, and then he came back to take his wife and 4 kids. And the second child was my father's father, Herschel. Everybody else was murdered. And the Vayetchna side, my father's mother's side, everybody was murdered. My mother came from Pinsk, and I don't know exactly which cities, but the last point before 1931, 32, they left Pinsk. My grandmother as girl and boy, and they got married, and Baruch Hashem, all the family. My mother remembers they were all murdered. My mother remembers as a kid how her mother fell on the floor. She collapsed because she cried. Her whole immediate and extended family was murdered. Now, I'm not denying who were the worst at the Holocaust. We're not denying them. But we have to live today, and we have to provide for tomorrow. And I'm telling you from what I experienced for almost 30 years.
That actually is an interesting question. In other words, many of those watching both in the United States, in Israel, elsewhere, we've made these kinds of visits, these heritage visits to come to Ukraine, to Poland, to Russia, wherever it is, to maybe walk in the footsteps of our El Zadis, maybe to find, a remnant of a house or a matzeva in a cemetery, a marker in a cemetery. And, I think most of us find that quite meaningful. But it's a kind of tourism, meaningful tourism. But you have now spent, your whole adult life back in the Altaheim. But it's not the Altaheim for you. It's the present Heim. It's your home, at least for however much longer you're going to be remaining there and serving your community. What does that mean? It's a different reality. It's a different encounter with the past than we do when we drop in on a summer tour or a March of the Living or something like that. It means you can't be spending your whole time with this kind of deep awareness of all of the past and like something out of an Isaac Bashevis Singer novel where the dead are all around us. We carry them with us. It would be impossible to go about your work, your important work every day if that's what it was all about. How do you, again, I'll use the word I used earlier, how do you negotiate, the ever-present past with the work of actually getting on and living and growing and building for the future?
In all the more being there and numerous times visiting the concentration camp, where people don't really realize, but from 6 million that we know, I don't know how many more, but the 6 million that the number everybody uses, at least 1 million either perished in Lvov or went through Lvov and sent out of Lvov. In other words, concentrated in Lvov, or they were concentrated at least 1 million, and some of them, I would guess about 500,000 were murdered in Lvov itself, and 500,000 was sent out to Belzhitz. What is it called? Belzhitz Maidan? I forgot what it's called. It drops. It's like literally 5 minutes after the border. You have on the right side that camp, that murder camp in Poland. Rabbi Michael Shudrick would give us, enlighten us. But there's a sign. It's called Kliparov Station. 500,000. There's a sign there in Yiddish and in English and Ukrainian. And 500,000, the very same tracks, the very same station. You can see the pictures black and white. You can see color today. It looks exactly the same. And you have 500,000 sent out of across the street from the concentration camp, with Simon Wiesenthal spent a few years in that camp. And it was called the River of Blood. There's a little lake by the camp. It was called the River of Blood. Literally 200,000 Jews murdered there. 136,800,000 Jews in the ghetto, which is next to the center. It's called Simsotricha, 700-year road, along the lines where the many decades before, where there was a river going through. They put it into a canal. where there are documented videos, there are documented films, and there are books written about the rivers underground with hundreds of Jews hid during the Holocaust. We're talking about a city infested with blood. This city is blood spilled over, splashed over all over the city. You cannot ignore it. Wherever you go, here was this, here they shot, here they killed, here they murdered. We know that. And the question is, what do we do with that? We go into bed and just throw the blankets over our heads. All the more the rush to create a better society. And who more than the Jews understand evil, and we have to show them an example of not wallowing in the past, but beaming and reviving and rejuvenating in the future.
Let me re-pitch that question. I asked about the kind of ever-present memory of the past, and you quite naturally and reasonably went to the example of the Holocaust and what happened, particularly in your community, in the events of the Shoah. But what about before that? In other words, the memory of the past after all, you're in Galicia. You're in what was, very much the cradle of Ashkenazi Jewry as we know it, certainly in terms of Hasidut, in terms of Torah, in terms of Lamdonim and Talmidei Chachamim and the Sfarim from which we learn, but also into larger questions of Jewish life and Jewish culture and Hebrew and Yiddish literature and everything that became at least Ashkenazi Jewry. If we're talking about Ukraine of today, then we must, by definition, be somewhat Ashkenazi centric in our discussion. But that present, not the tragic past, but that past is also very much a part of what's ever present in your work. And how does that get filtered through, knowing that this was once the cradle of Jewish learning and civilization? And also, we've got work to do on the ground. We can't just sit around talking about what was in the 19th century and the 18th century. We have to do something now in the 21st.
Great question. I mean, it's so unfortunate. It's so unfortunate. Most of Lvov, we're talking about literally 99.9% of the past of Lvov is obliterated, literally obliterated. We're talking about dozens of synagogues. Some people say between 40 and 70 large synagogues. Everyone is a monumental statement in of itself, and it's totally gone. There's some parts of the city where you go, at least one big lot in every block with a little tablet. This used to be a synagogue, and they want to wash it away, of course, and the activists and the young activists are protesting. You can't, you have to remember what was. But unfortunately, there was nobody there to tell us. I used to have a Yid from Basel. His name was Mona. I used to call him Moshe. I have no idea why. And he used to come back for Yom Neram, only Yom Neram for the 2 weeks of about 2 weeks. He used to come out for Rosh Hashanah, Kippur, and so on. And he used to come from Basel because he had a daven in his old shtot where he davened, where he grew up. Him and one other person survived the trains. They were both in the concentration camp. There was another guy, Yitzchak Meller. He went to Riga to his daughter, but he probably passed away. I lost a track of him after many years. Somebody told me, I think he passed away, I'm not sure. There were very few others. There were a few that left the country that came back and said, I was in Lvov. But there were very few other Jews that can tell us what was. There was a guy, a Chazan Sif from Florida, from Miami. He came to Lvov about 21, 22 years ago. He was in his early 80s. And he showed me, gave me a tour where the chief rabbi lived, with this shtibel, that shtibel, where he lived. And it was extremely interesting. I have to say, I don't know if anybody knows this. If they don't, this is interesting. He said there was government b'toich government. In other words, you had to give your taxes to the Jewish government, the Jewish community. Today it's on the street of Shalom Aleichem Street. And there was a government sort of Jewish building, and the Jewish community gave their taxes as a collective tax to the government. I have no idea how that works, but that's what he told me. And he showed me the big yard, which it still exists today, although not all the buildings are there, but he showed me exactly, there's a big yard, And today we're the old cemetery. It's called Krakowska Bazaar, the Krakow market, flea market. So you still have a few of those buildings, which includes a hospital. And you can see on top, if you're in Lvov, you can see on the street Rappaport with the Magen Davids in the bricks, built in right under the dome of the hospital. Beautiful building. And then right next door, there's like a ches, a Russian letter P, three sides. Moshe Zakenim old age home. Right after that, they just knocked it down 2 years ago during the pandemic when everybody was hiding in the houses. So that somebody managed to throw down another building and build a private clinic. But it used to be the Beis HaTamchi, the soup kitchen, all in one yard, including the cemetery. In other words, and there was a shul, the Tara Shtibel, where the Tara after passing away, and where they built it, the arenas, the caskets, it was all in one yard, and that old gate still exists. It was an exceptional, flourishing, and well-built community, all within feet from each other, all within one. The infrastructure was absolutely amazing, and we're talking about for hundreds of years. There was something l'shem l'til, there was something praiseworthy that they were able to structure around a beautiful system which caters to every need of the community and at every age. That's something that mind-boggling. I never saw that before.
We've been speaking about the past, of course, and our mind is very much on the traumas of the present. But I guess in my last question, I want to ask you about the future. What are the prospects for a community such as yours, for Lvov, going forward? I mean, we here in Yerushalayim are witness to the arrival of very many refugees. Of course, the hope here is that they will become olim, that they will settle here in Eretz Yisrael, just as we have hopes for all of diaspora Jewry. But that comes there's complications for what happens to a community behind. What do you see the future for Lvov, for Jewish Lvov?
Okay, I have two comments, which is interesting. If you go to the highway, the main highway, there's about three entrances. There are more. There are about 5 borders running out of Lvov to the border to Poland. 2 of them have direct highways built, beautiful highways, 2 lanes, or if not 3 lanes each, going to the border and continuing a highway, all sort of blocked by these blocks, these cement blocks. That you can just, with 2 hooks, take a crane, a tractor, you pick up those hooks and you move it away, and the highway is no border, nothing. Actually, to go to the border, you have to turn off the highway to the left, coming to Lvov to the right. You turn off the highway, you go into a massive gate, a massive property, but otherwise the highway is just direct. And I asked them, why is that? And they said, what do you mean? We're connecting to Europe and so on. That's number one. And then I realized in Lvov itself, around our house, around the shul, every second block, there are major apartment buildings built up. Usually it's 2-3 floors, maximum 4-floor houses. And all of a sudden you have the 8, 10, 12, 15-story houses all over. I'm talking about thousands of apartments. And I keep on asking, who's it for? Who has the money to pay for it? Who has the money to buy apartments? Everybody's so poor. The pension is only $70 to $100. Is ridiculous. Now they're putting it up, hopefully, for another few pennies, but it's ridiculous. A person cannot survive. Just the gas alone for just to warm up the house in the freezing cold. Forget about food. Forget about everything else. Is more than sometimes twice as much as the pension. People are dying from hunger. People don't have medicine. People are dying from sickness because they don't have money for medicine. Officially, medicine is for free, but there isn't. So now it's 10 times worse. That's the real war. But now, pounded on that, you have this external war. Now, and I asked everybody, thousands of apartments just in our area alone, let alone every area of the city. And I never understood, God, who needs that? Right now, we need money for food and heat. And all of a sudden, in one day, just one day, from a Wednesday to a Thursday, almost 2 weeks ago, all those apartments are grabbed. Every apartment is taken. There's not one empty apartment in the city. So the analogy is very simple. Shushan was some little hick town out there. And all of a sudden, Mordechai had his yeshiva, that the legend goes. And God brought these stullers, these carpenters, or whatever they were, to build the Shushan throne, the Achashverosh's throne in Shushan. And he had the whole, like the Medrash said, the whole nation came to Shushan, all the deputies, all the diplomats, and they created havoc and traffic as well with the privilege, the elite privilege. But Lvov turned into Shushan, literally turned into Shushan. Lvov became where all the ambassadors ran to, and many businesses, I'm getting calls today and yesterday, many businesses are moving to Lvov. I mean, they uprooted from Kharkov, they uprooted from other cities next to the Black Sea, and many from Kiev uprooted and came to Lvov for good.
Rabbi Bald, our time is short, and I know you have important work that you must get back to, but what's the prospect for the future of the Jewish community in Lvov?
So here, that's why I said, if Shushan is in Lvov, if innovation is in Lvov, Lvov has a very future bright prospect, and hopefully after the war, hopefully very soon, people will pick up the pieces and enjoy a beautiful, quiet, and peaceful life. And we're looking forward for you, Rabbi Jacks, Jeffrey Jacks, and for you, Rabbi Benjamin Blau, Rabbi from RCA. We're looking forward for both of your communities, from the traditional, from the RCA, from the OU. Come and visit, and those who are here, come again. And I'll tell you, 99% of the community did not leave. And we need your support, not only your pockets, we need you physically to come and show that they're distinct people and they're worthy people.
So, Rabbi Bald, that's really the message I want to end with. First of all, I want to thank you for your time. I know that you're there, as Rabbi Sachs referred to many times, you're busy with unbelievably noble work, and the insight that you provided for us and the understanding, really an appreciation for what Lvov is and what the Ukraine is like today was invaluable. But I guess I have to ask you, I know the last message you had was the right message. So what else is there? And what else is there we should be doing? Obviously, our tefillos are important. Financial, what else? And we should be coming. What do you think? And this is really we'll end with this note. And again, I want to thank Rabbi Sachs for putting together. The difficult situation is that we were only zocheh to have one panelist, but it was quite a panelist. And you really did a magnificent job. So Rabbi Bald, what else should we around the globe be doing to assist you? And I'll leave you that with the last word.
Okay, so there are two parts. People forget that after the war, when you pick up the pieces, when everybody lost their jobs and everything is gone, people are going to need assistance more than ever. In other words, most people, the ones that you see, most people, they need that support at the beginning. I mean, maybe it's professional support, maybe professional guidance and so on. But it's even more than now. It's going to be needed money to pick everybody up and put them back into life and into flourishing life. That's number one. Number two, about now, practically now. What's very important is before they close the borders, and God forbid they should close the borders, and before they start bombarding all the professionals think they will, it's important to get in food, especially long-lasting food, long-lasting shelf food, and the better, something that you don't have to prepare, because when they shoot the water and they shoot the electric station, and when you don't have propane and you don't have gas to run the generators, then we're in trouble, and God forbid, I mean, all cannons go loose. And that's when the Jews are at stake, because they're going to blame the Jews. That's when everybody's going to go meshuggah, and it's going to, I don't want to even think. So I think the faster we can to get over food products and medicine as much as they can, to stock it up for now and for tomorrow and for next week and for next month. Another thing, kosher LePesach. Do you have any kosher LePesach food, long lasting, that can be getting over? Just get it into the border. Later we'll think where and who goes to, but get it into the border before they close the border, so that the Jews that are staying there, they're literally probably a few 100,000 Jews are still here in Lvov, in Ukraine, and people don't get that. But they don't get it, that it's difficult for people to leave. They're all stranded with old parents. They can't move. Nobody is willing to accept them. A refugee, yes. What's tomorrow? What do you do after tomorrow? I have two women that came back yesterday to Lviv. They went to other countries, and they said they ran out of money. They just came back. Rabbi Shudrick is doing a magnificent job, accepting accepting people in Poland and sending them further. But there's not enough of support for the people that stayed there. It's very good, the refugees. What about the refugees that are in town that can't leave and they're stuck and stranded? We have to get in. There are many organizations working, and thank God that they have this Achtus. I want to give one bracha. It says, Ve'is Sorihili Yaakov. From the Achtus and from your support, that you're stretching out as much as possible and becoming a blessing to flow over to others, the less fortunate Ukraine. You creating the Yeshua for all of us, for those in and for those out. Mr. Hashem, thank you so much. Amen.
Thank you very much. We say Yeshua Hashem Keheravayan. We're coming up to Purim of V'nahapachu, so V'nahapachu should change very quickly, and the Kadosh Baruch should give us the Yeshua and you the Yeshua that you need. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Mordechai Wald, Rav of Lvov in war-torn Ukraine. I received a text message just now from Rabbi Michael Shudrick, who was meant to be with us. He was called away to something important, and then he was in a power outage and couldn't connect. Hopefully, we'll have an opportunity to hear from him about his important work. And the work of his colleagues in Poland who are involved in the life-saving work of absorbing and caring for the refugees. And all of our tefillot are with you for continue to your remarkable work. So on behalf of the Rabbinical Council of America and the Tradition Journal, we thank you. And please, again, in the chat or in the comments below, see the links to different opportunities to show your charitable support for this important work.